So joining us now is Silas Marshall. You can see his broad smile, and the name of his book is The Christian Handbook, and it is such an interesting story, and his life and what's happened to him and the journey that he took and the reason he wrote the book. We had a fabulous off-air conversation. So again, I am really pleased to welcome him on Author's Corner and for all of you to see him. And I said you had this great smile. What happened to your smile, Silas? There it is.
Right here.
He has a great smile. So tell me about, first of all, let's talk about your business. You were in the music business, you were rising fast, and what happened?
Well, I've always wanted to be a singer and a performer. And I would listen to records and the little 45s when I was growing up. And a lot of the people that I would listen to were the same people I ended up with. It was amazing. When I met them, they were like my heroes, but I had never seen them in person. So they were real nice. I was cool with them. They were very congenial. They actually we became friends. But as it progressed on, it began to be a case of, you got to do this for that, tit for tat. And it left the music completely. And they began to talk about Jesus Christ. And they would say demeaning things about him. And I used to wonder, why would these rich and famous people be talking about Jesus in such a derogatory way? And so I would get up and leave the room. They played chess a lot when we weren't in the studio. And so he had one of the brothers, the younger brother that got the first brother, the older brother in the music business. He came out with us. And so he says, Silas, does that bother you when you hear them talk like that? I said, yes, it does. I said, I don't really know why. I said, but they do it all the time. And it bothers me. And he said, well, it bothers me too. I said, well, are you a believer? Do you believe in Jesus? He said, not necessarily. But, I was raised at church. I went to church. But it's been years, man. But I just feel like we're not supposed to talk about Christ like that, Jesus. It's not the same. My heart says something's wrong. I said, me too. And so we went on and talked about other things. That was that encounter. So later on, after my 5-year contract was over, I was signed with them for 5 years. And that's when they said, well, Silas, we want you to do a 7-year contract. And when the 7-year contract came about, that's when the stipulation came in that, well, you're going to have to get that Jesus, and they use an expletive, and I was shocked. And I looked, and in maybe a few seconds, I said, what did you say to me? And they said the same thing. I said, well, I can't believe that you're saying that to me, because we've never talked about Jesus. We've never discussed my religious beliefs. I don't really have a religious belief about it. I've haven't in years. My mother went to church, but I went with her, had to go. But no, I said, that's way out. I said, why do you want that to be? Well, you have to do that so we'll feel comfortable with you. I said, comfortable? I said, I'll tell you what. So I took a few more minutes and I said, let me tell you something. I'm going to get up, leave here today. And I may call you and may not, but I'm not going to sign that deal like that. You take that stipulation out and, we're doing good business here. And I'll be ready to go forward with you. And they said, well, we don't know. I don't think we're going to take it out. I said, okay, well, I'll talk to you later. I'll give you guys a call. So I got up and left out of the room. Now, when I left out of the room, I had made up my mind that I wasn't going to be in anything like that. Never thought about selling my soul or anything like that. But that's kind of like the way it was. It was like, you do this, or you can't enter into our realm, in other words. And I said, okay. Well, I went on and I said to myself, as I went out, I said, I'm still young. I can do what they are doing. I've learned a lot from these guys. They used to take me to business meetings. And I said, they always wanted me to be more than an artist. They would talk about artists. See, the artists is the little ones on the totem pole. They don't really make a lot of money. And they would tell me the inside story. So I said, I could do whatever they do. I could do it. And I went out to try to make that happen. Started my own record company. And I called it,
What'd you call the record company?
I called it Moral Fiber. Okay. Moral Fiber, because I was tired of hearing a lot of negative music, either over sexualized or over just nasty, bad words. That was when the gang banging songs, they call them, was coming on at that time in the 80s. And so I was trying to turn it around and do positive songs, which we did. And we did great songs. And we put them out ourselves. So it was a minimum of a success. We even bought a record pressing plant in Decatur, Georgia. And because my business plan was to be able to put my own records out and other people's records out to make revenue.
Right.
And so we were successful at that, right? We were very, very successful at that. And in fact, I got the last records that CBS was pressing. They were going to press some records, but it wouldn't be in the mass that they used to because of the CDs that came in. But anyway, Kate, we had fun. We did I had a lot of different people that would come to us that had success in the music industry before. And we did their records. And so soon, it came down to not being able to really get enough of the numbers and not really being able to sustain. So I ended up losing that business, sold it, and actually just sold the pressing plants of the actual machine that we press with, and to another company out in Florida that was doing pretty good business. And there was only two in the area, my company and another company in Florida. So this prompted me to get more serious about the Word of God. It just came on me. That's because I actually told them I was going to find out more about Jesus. If he was that important to them, I thought maybe he must be somebody really important. So I did. And as I began to read the Bible, it took on its own being. And I found out that as you read the Bible, it begins to tell you about itself. It explains itself, which I had never had anyone tell me that. But it explains itself. So at first, you may not know what you're reading. But if you keep on being persistent, it begins to tell you exactly what it wants to tell you. And I guess it goes into your mind, to your intellect, and you begin to understand. It's a matter of not giving up and believing that, that this is something God wants me to know. And so faith began to bubble in me and manifest itself. And then I took on just reading different books, and I got a hold to Strong's Concordance, and with the King James Version, that actually gives you a way to define the words from in the English, from Hebrew, from Aramaic, and Greek language, and you can get the real meaning of the word. Because when English takes some words and makes it be totally something different, and when that happened, then I started getting even a wider view of what I was reading. And I just continued to read the Bible from the front to the back, to the back to the front. and you're just on and on. And now, when I did get to Revelations, this is where my story intensified. I loved the Bible. It was such a story. It was like his history. His history is like, for me, it became his story. As we call it history, but I saw it as God's story, and I learned amazing things. So by the time I got to Revelation, the Bible warns you to be very careful about Revelation.
Right.
Don't misquote. Yeah, don't misquote it. Know what you're talking about, as you can get in trouble. So the things that stood out to me that got me first was when I got to Revelation 13. And it tells me that the saints of God would be warred against and overcome. Well, that hit me like bang, because we had always been taught that you would be raptured. Now, the rapture theory is most people that go to church right now believe in that. So it's not like the rapture theory is wrong. It's the sequence, but it's going to be after something happens. Now, what is that? The Antichrist, which we hear all about, he's coming first. Okay, which he's works for the devil. So the devil, the Antichrist, and then the false prophets, they have their three unholy trinity. They come. Now the devil is, you don't just see the devil, but he's behind them. And they set up a kingdom. This is before anybody's rapture. Anybody leaves here. Nothing's happening. We're still everyday life. But the biggest thing after that was he institutes a one world government that says you can only buy or sell. In other words, no commerce for you if you do not sign my deal, if you do not become a part of what I believe. Then you can't buy or sell. You can't have a radio show. You can't have a music show. You cannot have anything. Only if you join my club. So that got to me too, because I was like, wow, I've never understood. No preacher, nobody had ever mentioned that to me, but yet it was there in black and white in the Bible. And so I began to learn more. And as I began to learn more, it showed me that, wow, I've been thinking that the devil was cast out of heaven like a million years ago, way back there somewhere. But it's obvious that he was in the Garden of Eden. So I said, he had to be there as long as Adam and Eve were there. Mm-hmm. So it became a little more mind-opening. So I began to study more. And as I studied, I mean, like what I'm telling you, Kate, many people would probably disagree.
Sure.
But I'm telling you what is biblically correct. And it's in my book. So in my book, the Christian Handbook of Survival, it actually takes out the things in the Bible, and I have scripture to prove it. So if one was to read that and basically read it, pray over it, read it again, you would see that I haven't made up anything. I'm not a prophet. I'm not a dreamer. But I have taken from the prophets, like Daniel. In Daniel 12, it tells you that he saw these visions and dreams. And when he saw it, he saw that this Antichrist, this son of perdition, and he saw that there would be a person that would come into the world. And it's like the last kingdom of the world, because that's what Daniel saw, was the statue with the head of gold, the iron of the arms, and the legs were, and the toes were mixed with clay and iron. That's the last kingdom. So as he went on in his vision, scared him to death. And so God, or the angel, told him, say, don't go any further, seal this up, because this is for a long time in the future. And so he basically did. He wrote that in 12, which is the last book of Daniel. And then he shut it up. Okay. But now, when a guy like myself took that back up and put that together with Paul, the most, they say, one of the greatest apostles, boy, did he go through a lot to become a great apostle, because he was a persecutor of the Christians, okay? And so Paul has a quite amazing story. But in 2 Thessalonians, 2nd chapter, when you read that whole chapter of 2 Thessalonians, 2nd chapter, he tells you the whole thing about the man of sin setting up his kingdom. It tells you that he will make people, he will change times and seasons. You know, kind of like people want to change the Constitution. It would be like that. And then you come in and you just change everything around. And we wake up and we're in another world, you know, because everything's changing. And so this is what this man of sin does. And then they say he's sitting where he ought not be. This is Paul's writing. Right. In other words, he's trying to take over the holy seat of God. And as I read it, it seemed to be happening over there in Israel. It was somewhere over there. And this whole thing is going to happen, what they call the Holy Land. And so it's not like it's happening here in America, but it'll be a worldwide movement. But his capital, his seat, will be over there. Okay.
So and for you, Silas, let me interrupt you for a second. I mean, it's wonderful. It's beautiful. Because you've gone over the Bible, like you said, you really wanted to dig through the meanings. Yes. And I love what you said. His story. Wow, no one's ever put it that way to me before, or probably people that are watching this. His story, so well said. So this book, the Christian Handbook of Survival, when people read it, you go deeper. And as you said, you're not a prophet. You're pulling out and you're talking about meanings, right?
Yes. Yes. I'm talking about what other prophets, real prophets.
Right.
Because Daniel was a prophet. Paul was a prophet.
Right.
He was an anointed man of God, which he was an apostle, but he also had prophecy. Matthew, you go to Matthew 24, it goes on to tell you, and then Jesus begins to speak. And that's the red letter edition. You see the red, that's Jesus, right? So he tells you about this terrible time. And a lot of us have been taught that it'll be one tribulation, and it's the tribulation of God when he comes to get the bad guys. Well, actually, I prove that there's two tribulations, because the Antichrist has a first tribulation when he makes people, force people to do what he wants and say, you can't buy or sell. That means you can't eat. That means you can't go to the doctor. That means you basically turn into a sub community and you have to go underground. So the book also explains to Christian people how they should walk and how they should act at this time when they see this happening. Because I know that this will happen. So when I'm warning them about, at this point, when you see this, they're going to say, Jesus is here. He just came. He's at the big baseball stadium. He's got a big crowd over there. We go in there now, and there are people that tell you on the street. Because at this time, people won't have any discernment, which means they don't know who you are. The only way they'll know who you are is if you're around preaching and fussing with them and arguing with them like people do now about the war in Israel. And so you identify who you are as an opposing view. Well, at this time, the Bible tells us, Jesus tells us to be quiet. He says, agree with your adversary in the way. See, the way is whatever way you're going. You're going down the street, passing them by, you're at the grocery store, whatever. But you do not argue. You're not trying to preach the gospel at this time. If you ain't preached the gospel before then, you don't need to do it then, because you need to conceal who you are for this time. Now, the time period is 3.5 years. And you find that also in these scriptures that I'm telling you. 3.5 years, what you wind in Daniel, it goes into 1,360 days or 90 days. in Daniel. Then it goes into in Paul, it talks about 42 months. And then another one will tell you, Jesus Christ talks about it in terms of times and a half of times, how they used to talk back then. Well, time and a half of time is 3.5 years.
Yeah.
42 months, which is easy for us to figure, is 3.5 years. Mm-hmm. So a lot of our theologians and religious people have seen this period coming, but they've seen it as a 7-year period. What God has shown me was specific, that this is the period we should be most concerned with, not arbitrary numbers and not in taking the Bible out of context. But this is a very, very important time, because this is the time. Go ahead.
This is the time, and we don't want to tell everyone everything because we want them to get your book. Yes. But in summing it up, and you've told us wonderful, wonderful pieces of what they can find out. Yes. What do you hope people take away from reading the Christian Handbook of Survival, Silas?
I hope that they would take upon their minds and their heart that the Bible is true. God is real, and Satan is real, and their war is against each other. We're like the in between it. You know, we're like the meat between the bread, I call it sometimes.
It's a good way to put that.
Yeah, and so but it's their war. And obviously, people are going to choose sides. But what I want people to get out of that is to know that there's a paradise coming. And we give away everything in this world for the lucrative careers, the lucrative jobs, and we forget about God. See, there's nothing wrong with money. Okay, there's nothing wrong with being rich. Look at all the rich people that were in the Bible. Okay, quite a few of them.
Right.
But you don't give your soul ever to anything or anybody, because that soul can live forever. See, we have the capacity to live forever. That's what I want people to get out of it too. Is that, you know what? You're going to live forever. So why are we going out with a bang? You know, like that.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. So it's interesting. So in summation, that you just brought us full circle. It's exactly what you talked about, what you had to deal with in the music industry, and you didn't sell your soul. And I think that's the lesson here. That's the lesson here. So I want to tell everybody, please go and get this book. There's so many wonderful lessons in it. And Silas, thank you so much for joining us on Author's Corner.
I just want to show a little bit of the book that I got on the front cover.
Yeah, there it is. It's wonderful.
Yes.
Can everybody see that? Slide that over a little bit for us, Silas, and we'll see. Yeah, and the scales. You see that right on the front of the Christian Handbook of Survival. Yeah.
Right. That's it.
Yeah.
So, and you can find that at Barnes and Noble and
Amazon.
And Amazon.
Yes, absolutely. Silas, thank you so much.
Okay, I appreciate you so much. You're a wonderful person.
Thank you. You too.
Okay, bye-bye.